And having that relation and knowing where I came from helped me start realizing and looking back at a lot of the artwork and tribal work from that village, right? So I incorporate a lot of that symbolism of African art, sculptures, face masks. It's indigenous, right? It's something that is in our DNA, and I feel is what my ancestors were doing. Is I'm doing the same thing, coming up with something that's beautiful that reflects their identity. So when I create a topiary, I'm reflecting on my own identity and the identity of that space it's in.
But when we look back to our indigenous history and our slave history, and we look along the Mississippi Valley in particular, we can really find the waves of story and healing that has happened from so many herbal plants. Thank you so much to our Native brothers and sisters and cousins for what you have taught us and that has gone for so long unnoticed.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Right now we're going to get into our third and final session of the day. And here to introduce the presenters will be Shakita. And let me also add a note. At the end of the session, all the participants, moderators, their contact information. We're working on something to put it up there so you can reach out to them directly if you have any questions or comments that cannot be addressed at this time. So thank you again for attending this second annual African American Legacy and Gardening and Horticulture.
Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to see all beautiful faces still here. I hope you're all enjoying today's discussions and taking in the wealth of knowledge that's being shared. It is an absolute honor to introduce this last session here. So far too long, authentic African American voices and stories and lived experiences have been sidelined or erased from mainstream environmental literature and media. This exclusion has not only diminished Black agency, but also has perpetuated harmful stereotypes, ones that suggest African Americans have little to no connection with nature, conservation, or the outdoors. Yet history and contemporary movements tell us otherwise. Black writers, scholars, and conservationists have long been reimagining and redefining the relationship between the African American community and the natural world. In this plenary session, we'll explore how these narratives are being reclaimed, rewritten, and amplified. Our esteemed panelists bring a wealth of expertise in literature, environmental justice, and cultural storytelling, each offering a unique perspective on how we can better understand and elevate these important stories. So let me introduce the incredible voices leading today's discussions. So we have Dr. Cherie Rivers and Dr. Jarvis McInnes, and our moderator is going to be Zelda Lockhart. So y'all can please come to the stage. Rivers blends scholarship, music, and environmental activism. She's an associate professor of geography and environment at UNC Chapel Hill and the founder of Dandelions, a biodynamic farm that integrates freedom farming practices, fostering a reciprocal relationship with the earth. She is also the author of Necessary Noise, Music, Film, and Charitable Imperialism in the East of Congo, which delves into the intersections of cultural, sound, and social change. We also have Dr. Jarvis McInnes, an interdisciplinary scholar in the Cordelia and William Laverick family, assistant professor of English at Duke University. His research connects African American and African diaspora literature with sound and performance studies, shedding light onto the cultural and historical significance of Black agrarian life. His forthcoming book, Afterlives of the Plantation, Plotting Agrarian Futures in the Global Black South, promises to be a powerful contribution to our understanding of Black rural experiences and landscapes. And our amazing Dr. Zelda Lockhart is a writer, musician, teacher, and speaker. And Dr. Lockhart has left an indelible mark on literature and storytelling. She is a past Piedmont laureate and the director of her Story Garden Studios, a space that nurtures the creative voices of women. As a Fulbright scholar to the area, she has expanded the reach of her work globally, and her latest novel, Trinity, has even been translated into French. So these are some wonderful and amazing voices, and I hope y'all all enjoy them.
Thank y'all for being here, and I'm going to just start by saying I appreciate the two of you so much. I appreciate this entire forum and symposium and the way that energy comes together. Carter Q, who's walking around back there, thinking about this a few years ago, and then bringing together other people with amazing thought processes, and us being able to be here in this energy today where we connect over our love of the land and of gardening and of wanting to come home in so many ways to our indigenous selves. So I read a little bit of the work of Dr. McInnes and Dr. Rivers, and I almost forgot that I needed to be here today because I just wanted to stay in the sun reading y'all's work all day because I felt such kinship and connection about so much. But I'm going to start with one main thing that I found myself asking, and I yesterday heard other people asking, and I'm going to just say it's a riddle, and so it's that riddle of how do we, on the one hand, become stewards of the land, reconnect to property, and come home to property in a capitalistic system without repeating the violence of capitalism. It's this sort of loop in this riddle. And so I'm going to ask them to do two things to start off. To describe a little bit about their two separate works that I have been reading from, to express a little bit about their forthcoming project. And then within that, to talk some about that riddle that's within your forthcoming work and where you're at with that.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for this wonderful question, Zelda. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Carter Q for inviting me to participate in this exciting symposium. So, as you can see here, my forthcoming manuscript, Afterlives of the Plantation, Plotting Agrarian Futures in the Global Black South, is an effort to tie Southern African American and Afro-Caribbean peoples and cultures and ideas and economies to explore those connections in the early part of in the late 19th century through the early 20th century. And I'm interested in foregrounding the importance of agriculture to notions and visions of Black progress. We learned so much about, or at least I've learned so much about the Great Migration, right, and this desire to leave the South. And I became very interested in what happened to the Black people who stayed. I was born and raised in Mississippi. My grandparents did not migrate. And I wondered, how did these people imagine themselves as modern subjects, right? How did they continue to build beautiful lives, right, despite the racial violence, despite the poor economic conditions, right, that they confronted? And also, how did they understand themselves as being connected to Black people in other parts of the world? And so I've had a long interest in diaspora and the kind of spreading of Black people throughout the world and how they understood themselves as connected or disconnected from each other. And I discovered in my research the significance of Booker T. Washington School, Tuskegee Institute. Now, I am a a graduate of an HBCU, Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. And one of the questions I often asked myself was, what does it mean for me to be educated on the site of a former cotton plantation where the mansion is still present on campus? And I would find myself walking across campus, right, trying to re-envision where the slave quarters would have been, where the cotton would have been grown, right, and really sitting with that paradox, right, of that being the space that was transformed, right, into, a site for educating the formerly enslaved, and so that I, in 2005, could, arrive there as an undergraduate student. And so I saw a similar history in Tuskegee, which was also a former cotton plantation, but of course a turned, agricultural and industrial school, but it also has the unfortunate has had the misfortune of being attached to and reduced to Booker T. Washington's complicated political legacy, right? But as I delved into the archives, I noticed that, wait, Tuskegee actually is being talked about in Jamaica. It's being talked about, and this project is being taken up in Guyana. It's being talked about and being taken up in Haiti, and not only by colonial administrators, but by Black people in those spaces as well. And so I became really interested in what does it mean that the cultural and intellectual production from the U.S. South is circulating transnationally, and what does it mean that Black people in these different spaces are taking up these ideas and translating them into their own visions of freedom. Some of them rejected Booker T. Washington's political conservatism, right? But they understood agriculture to be essential, right, for their progress and futurity as well. So I'm trying to tell an intertwined story that way. So that's a brief synopsis of the manuscript. And in terms of how do we deal with this paradox, the place I would go is to George Washington Carver, right, who's been named and perhaps is sort of low-hanging fruit in these circles. But as I delved into Tuskegee's archive and I delved into Carver's bulletins, he really did believe that there was a symbiotic relationship between Black people and the earth, and so I focus so much on what sitting with his work taught me to do is to think about the work of regeneration, right? What did they have to do to regenerate these poor, degraded soils, these soils that had been depleted by cotton cultivation, right? And how did he teach poor, rural Black folk in Alabama to take the muck and the mud from the river beds, right? Things that were within their purview, that were affordable to them, right, to regenerate those soils. And so that is the kind of logic or ethic that I try to pull out of a Tuskegee project that is bound up with certain forms of industrial capitalist exploitation anyway, but what's happening on the ground there as well, and try to pull it through a broader sort of diasporic narrative.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Rivers?
Well, I'll start by echoing the gratitude that so many others have expressed at being included in such a nourishing and thoughtful event. It's really an honor to be here, and I have much gratitude to the organizers, to everybody behind the scenes, and to all of you for being here. So I kind of think what I sent you wasn't fair because it sounds like it's just a book. And really, when I describe the project that I'm working on right now, it's an interconnected trio of things. So all of my work is rooted in the land that sustains me. And so I can't really get to the book without talking about that first, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah, please do, please do. I find it all very interconnected. Yeah, so go ahead.
So I won't get too far afield in the history of my connection to this particular land that is in Orange County. I've been on it since 2012, and when I inherited it, it was a very, very wounded piece of land. And so it, for me, has represented a very literal, physical process of regeneration in like the most embodied way. Through that process, I started out just wanting a little garden because I didn't know how else to feed my children. And that garden grew to embrace many other communities who also wanted their hands in the soil and didn't have necessarily access, and were also grateful for healthy, nourishing food. this project has evolved over time to become a teaching garden. Because part of my answer to your question is and what we heard so beautifully in the previous panel, is this emphasis on passing this knowledge on, and where there have been interruptions to find bridges to bring people back into this call, as you said so beautifully, towards re-indigenization, right? So I work within the teaching garden, and my project right now is to expand that, to expand the teaching space, because I have encountered a real thirst for people to have a place to go to cultivate the knowledge and the skills to actually have relationship with Earth in the most practical way. I'm also writing a book about that process. And about the values that we strive to uphold, the principles and priorities that guide our decisions on the land. And the third piece of that for me is, so I teach on this land, in this farm, in this garden, do natural building, all kinds of things. And I have this curriculum that I've developed that I know how to use, but I'm trying to put that in a format that could be available for other people if they're interested in lesson plans and structures of how to do this. So I'll say just a little bit about the book, because I think that's the most direct way to get to your riddle. So the title of this book in process is Sustenance, and it tells all kinds of stories. It's a collection of 14 short essays and stories. It tells the story of the garden that raised me, my father's garden, and I was again so grateful for the generosity of sharing in the last panel these ancestors who instill in us the practices and habits of tending earth, and for me that's my father. So it tells the story of the garden that raised me, and then the garden that I also inadvertently recreated his garden as I've transformed this land. But I'm telling these stories to take up two deceptively simple questions. What do we actually want to sustain, and what actually sustains us? And my answer to both of those things is the earth. That's what I actually want to sustain, and that's what, in my view, actually sustains us. So the question that I'm grappling with, the riddle that you posed, is how do we do that when we operate at the scale that we do? That's right. And a couple of things that I'll say that guide me in regards to this riddle. One is that we have to reckon with the fact that we have to start from where we are. Right? There's no way that we can imagine ourselves out of this. We have to work incrementally. And I always think about how long it took to get into this circumstance that we are collectively in. That took time. That was an incremental process, right? And so I see time and the kind of patience that again came up in the previous panel as an important piece of that. The other piece that is really orienting for me, and it's quite relevant that you were talking about these big plantation sites, because I think often about Jamaican thinker, writer, cultural theorist, just wise woman, Sylvia Wynter, and her reflection on the plantation and the plot, right? And the logic of capitalism manifesting in an ever-expanding, machine-oriented relationship to land, and the point is always larger and larger growth. But then she talks about the plot, right? This little piece of land that plantation owners allowed enslaved people to cultivate food. And of course, this was a ruthless economic calculation on the part of plantation owners, right? It was cheaper for them if people could work in the fields all day and then come home and cultivate their own food. So I'm not suggesting that it's a benevolent gesture on the part of a plantation owner. And yet, the ways that communities inhabited these plots with a deep respect and love and care for this earth that nourishes us despite. And one thing that really sticks with me is that the plot is always on a small scale. It can always only ever be on a small scale. It is in actual real living community with the real living land and the real living human beings. And to me, there's something profound in thinking about scale. Right? You talk about how do we do this without just repeating the mistakes of capitalism as the driving economy of colonialism. And the point of all of that is for everything to always be bigger. And I find that there's a tremendous power in operating on the scale that we can actually tend with care, and trust that we can build networks of people who do the same, but that it doesn't have to be uniform and it doesn't have to be universal, and that the very land that we inhabit can teach us what we need to do in the place that we are, and that will always look different from the land over there.
Yeah, because that in and of itself is allowing yourself to operate based on the actual system, which is nature that you belong to, as opposed to capitalism, and Dr. McInnes writes and talks a lot about those plots. Those like here we have slave quarters, and then we have these plots of land for growing food, for growing one's individual food, but that one has no legal dominion over. And as I was reading both of your excerpts and both of your works, I was thinking so much about plot, as Dr. McInnes talks about with the small piece of land, as you just talked about, Dr. Rivers. Plot, as you talk about with the plot to escape to freedom. It's just like that's a plot. And then also plot as story. So I'm going to bring that into the picture because there is, in both of your works, you're referencing, it's almost like you're using the modality of plot, of story, and of narrative as a way to help yourself and to help others understand and contextualize this relationship that we all want to get to. And I'm going to bring that in, this is the Miss Story lady. But, but yeah, so I want to know, like in both of your works, the ways that, for instance, Dr. McInnes, you are referencing the Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and you're referencing the lives of the characters within there in order to contextualize the riddle. So I want to hear a little bit more about your choice of using story. And then, Dr. Rivers, I want to hear about how the beauty of your writing, of the personal story of your growing up and your current also wanting to raise your children in this way in which you were raised. I just want to hear from both of you about your use of story to convey these questions that you have.
Thank you for that question. I think it's simply that, I think it's a very simple answer for me, is that I'm trained as a literary scholar. So I think with texts. When I have an idea, as I've been listening to many of the ideas that have been circulating throughout the symposium last night and today, my mind goes to, what novel, what poem grapples with this idea? Where can I go to teach my students to help them to grapple with the importance of Black folks in forestry and Black people's relationship with trees? And in terms of last night's conversation, or where can I go in the African American or African diasporic literary tradition to get my students, or to better grapple with myself, right? The importance of ethnobotany and so forth and so on. So I think it's that. I have been living with literature in the Black literary tradition for so long that is my touch point for thinking through so many questions, because I think our writers have grappled with this so significantly. And just to in such generative, ways, right? And so I think that sometimes using story in that way can help students, I guess I'm putting my teacher hat on, which perhaps is never off, but can help students to wrestle with ideas, more complex ideas, in ways that are sort of different from, or perhaps more legible or more palatable than some other modalities, right? Or perhaps that is the modality in which I feel that I can be most effective in conveying those ideas, right? So, and then what I would say too is a part of my work as it relates to narrative. I'm really interested in the way that narratives travel, right, and the way that narratives circulate, and in the way that narratives impact other communities. So, for example, I was really interested to learn that Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up From Slavery, that it was translated into over 17 languages in his lifetime, and that it circulated to readers in Cuba and to Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, and in Haiti, et cetera, et cetera. And so I became really interested in how those narratives impacted those readers and what they saw in those narratives, right? What is it that they took away from that project? So I love telling this example. So there's Marcus Garvey, right? Acclaimed Pan-Africanist leader of the largest movement of Black people, mass movement of Black people in the 20th century. Garvey reads Washington's Up From Slavery around 1912 or so, and he becomes inspired, and he says, where is our Black king? Where is our Black kingdom? Where is our Black military? Now, if Booker T. Washington knew that he was asking those questions of his book, he'd say, you are completely misreading me, right? This has nothing to do, I am not invested in that project whatsoever. So I'm also interested in those mistranslations, right? And the way that people take something different, right? But still is liberatory, right? He's looking for a solution to the problem of colonialism and imperialism in the aftermath of slavery. And his answer is he takes the kind of project of Black self-help that Washington is trying to, that Washington and other folks at Tuskegee, because I want to be very clear, it's not just Washington's genius, it is Tuskegee's genius, and there's lots of disagreement, right, on the ground at Tuskegee with Washington. But so there's a self-help philosophy that's happening at a very local place that Garvey is trying to scale up to something that is a kind of global pan-African vision. So I'm also interested in the way that people in different places project different meanings onto texts to envision their own projects of black liberation and solidarity.
Yeah, it's like stories pollinate.
Yes.
It's like a pollination process. And for another time, and if it comes up today, great, but maybe for another time, it'd be interesting for, like, when I think about, okay, you were born in Mississippi. I was born in Mississippi too. Yeah. Born in Mississippi, and then you've gone all of these other places, and that you've carried your story with you, and that everybody in this room has gone all of these places and carried their story with them. However it is that you're telling that story or offering that story, then when you encounter other people, the ways in which it might translate for them into some kind of inspiration or fruit or medicine or kinship and so on and so forth. But
Can I just say, I would use the language, I love the botanical metaphor that you brought us to, because I'm thinking about transplantation and cross-pollination, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of how these ideas circulate throughout the Black world.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Rivers, how about you?
So there's a proverb that means a lot to me, and it says, the world is made of stories and human beings enact the stories we believe. And I was gifted by my garden-loving father a story that this earth is paradise, and we can treat this earth accordingly. We live in a garden that is designed to sustain and nourish life. Mm-hmm. And if we believe that story, we will act accordingly. Mm-hmm. And I think I am drawn towards education as a means of transmitting stories. And I think in that context about something that I really treasure from Ross Gay's book, Inciting Joy, where he talks about seeds, and he talks about the seeds that his ancestors brought in moments of migration. He talks about seeds that other ancestors have carried with them through the worst possible moments of their lives. Mm-hmm. And he says, I am not quoting directly. If I knew this was going to come up, I would have brought the exact citation because it is exquisite. So pardon the paraphrasing, but he says essentially that we all have these stories, right? Mm-hmm. These seeds that somebody saved to feed us. Mm-hmm. To grow our stories over and over and over again. And he says, people save these seeds because they love these seeds, and they save them for us because they loved us, even if they didn't know us yet, right? So he has a definition of education that is to expand the repertoire of what we love And to me, stories have the power to do exactly that. And that's how what I strive to do in the teaching garden is to share the stories that open up the possibility that if we believe we live in a garden designed to sustain life, then we will enact that truth.
Yes, yes, and you and inside of the little piece of the work that I read, I feel like there are stories, and then you talk about essays. Can you tell us just a little bit about maybe one of the essays that that you use to contextualize, your own journey? And thank you so much for speaking about seeds and stories together in that way. I feel that way about seeds and origin, and yes, all that. I could say more, but I'm the moderator. I'm like, child, I want to just talk to you. But anyway, yeah, can you tell me some more about like maybe one of the essays? Yeah.
Gladly. There's I'm sort of linking this to a question that came up in the last panel that I was really grateful to hear and to hear the responses to. There's a chapter there's an essay in this collection called Dandelion School, because I consider myself I aspire to be a good student of Dandelion School. We named the educational farm that we run Dandelions because of what dandelions have taught us, and particularly in the spirit of seeing the world, learning to see the world as a life-sustaining garden. Dandelion is such a mighty teacher for me in that sense. Dandelions who will grow up through the cracks of the most urbanized areas. Dandelions who will repopulate parking lots and any space really. And dandelions who have these incredibly medicinal roots, whose leaves are full of nutrients, whose flowers sustain pollinators, and I like to think even allow us to blow our wishes out into the world. What a beautiful gift, right? And yet we're taught to call dandelions weeds in some bizarre context, right? And for me, that teaches a lot about the logics in which we're asked to operate, right? And in that essay, I write about what I refer to as the logic of scarcity, which we have to work so hard to manufacture, right? We have to get it in people's heads that those really nutritious medicinal plants are actually weeds, so we should poison them and then run around complaining that there's not enough food, right?
There's a lot of metaphor in that,
right? But there's also like literal, it's literal, right? There's, like, we are actually surrounded by food. We poison it because we are. If we believe in the story of scarcity, that's how we act it out in the real world, right? But what I strive to learn from Dandelion School is the logic of abundance, which we can also learn how to teach, right? And if we can shift our perception such that rather than a weed to be treated with a chemical, we see a life-sustaining friend, and then if we get cozy up to Dandelion and we strike up a good friendship, then what happened to me was Dandelion started to introduce me to her other friends, and I met a whole host of other plants who might be categorized as weeds, but I tell you, they make really, really wonderful food and medicine, and it's quite literally how we eat on the land. And so stories of that nature, and it's all told through my own experience of trying to transform land that was very, very wounded, and what these plant teachers taught me along the way, and how both metaphorically and in terms of practical recipes. There's recipes in the book for mixing seedling soils, so if people want to give it a try, here's a little leg up. So there's the really literal sense, and there is also the metaphoric sense of how can I emulate this dandelion who can grow in an abandoned parking lot and transform that site into a source of medicine, a source of nutrients, a source of beauty, and a source of hope. So that's something that I reflect upon.
Thank you for that. And I can't help in the story that you're telling to think of the metaphor. So replacing dandelion with people of color, You're about to pull the. I'm getting ready to say something, but you look like you're going to pull the mic up.
No,
okay,
no.
so I'm gonna.
I was just giving her an amen. That's all.
So I'm getting ready to go out on a theoretical, metaphorical limb. So you know, listening to Dr. McInnes and reading about you know, Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee and George Washington Carver, and in my head something's happening. Like I'm like creating this amalgam of a person generationally who is taking all that they knew and all that they were trying to do about the riddle, and is marching forward in time and becoming someone's child and then someone's child with this, and then I land at Dr. Rivers, who's taking this plot of land, and there's this piece, you know, in your piece where I'm reading about, you know, like old cars, refrigerators, like to come up on something that is a piece of land. It is a good sort of replica of if we were to think, you know, give me an example of what a piece of land looks like after, you know, someone who's really married to capitalism and they got to have all the stuff. And then there's this one part where I just had to put it down because I was like, that is brilliant to bring that forward as one of the small pieces to give us example. Where there's, and correct me if I get it wrong, but one of the things that's sort of dug up and trying to remove all of this stuff, all this poison from the land, and all of this hoarding, and that we buy things that we don't need, but we want them. It's 40 toys, 40 of the same toy. That's these little, it's a little fish, a plastic little fish tank thing with the gooey, like fish water stuff in it, with all the fish in it. Have y'all seen that little toy before? And the little fish are just kind of caught in there, and then there's 40 of them, you know. And so here's the going out on a limb. So when we think about you having a curriculum, education, you've designed particular things, you're bringing students to this space, you're bringing community members to the space to help them to learn and be educated, and as part of your answer to the riddle, are you the modern day George Washington Carver? Are you the modern day Booker T. Washington? Okay, I was just checking. That's my limb.
I'm just trying to be a student of Dandelion School. That's the best I got.
Yes. So, with each of you, I want to ask you, before we go into some Q&A, because I love Q&A, so I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for Q&A, so we're not just talking at y'all. But with each of you, if there's something that you could tell the audience about what they can do today, what they can do after we leave today, what they can do tomorrow's, you know, Sunday, some people have off work, what they can do tomorrow, what can they do to begin, as you said, with where they are and who they are right now and the microcosm of that, what can they do to begin to restore their relationship with nature that hopefully, inevitably begins to restore the planet itself?
I'll let you start. You're the practitioner.
and don't be shy about including stories.
Okay. So, what if we were to entertain the possibility that we live in a garden already? Then what would we do? And maybe we would notice the plants that are already here. Maybe we would stop and have the respect to say hello, to offer a greeting. And maybe the conversation would start from what literally is already here. And I've learned the most from plants, quite frankly. People are really helpful. I love that, but I've really learned the most from plants. And for me, there's a lot of power in stopping and paying attention and listening to the answer. And I mean that, like, not what does my phone think that this is? But like, what if the phone goes to the side and we actually engage with the plants that are around us? Even just taking the time to notice them and notice which ones. I loved that it came up in the last panel that plants work hard to be beautiful. They want our attention, right? So following which plants we're attracted to, and then build a relationship with the ones that touch our hearts, right? I think oftentimes we approach these kinds of questions, we're conditioned to approach them in a deeply intellectual way, and I think it can get out of balance. That's part of why I'm so compelled by the definite education that is to expand the repertoire of what we love, because implicit is that our hearts have to be connected for us to actually be invested in changing things. And so, I think curiosity is also a really, really powerful action that we can engage. And again, paying attention. What members of the natural world do we encounter? Maybe somebody's not that into plants, but they love butterflies, or maybe they love birds, or maybe it's fish or mammals, or whatever it is that activates the heart to actually give that time and space and lean into the questions and the practices. Because in my observation of human beings, we tend to take really good care of that which we love, right? And so creating opportunities to build a heartfelt connection makes us internally inspired, not because we're trying to mitigate our environmental footprint, right? That's a practice of negation. Right. But if we actually build a relationship and our hearts are involved, we want to enact care. So those are some of the things that have been helpful for me.
Yeah, I love
helpful for me.
Yeah, I love what you said about paying attention and noticing. A lot of times, if we notice what's happening inside our bodies, like what's ailing you, even what's happening in your mind, what's going on with you mentally, and then we just spend some time walking the same path every day, and the things that we are attracted to and curious about are often the things that you say, do a lot of work to get our attention, are trying to get your attention because it is the thing to cure the thing that is bothering you. Yeah, so I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo so much of what was just said, and I think that for me, my relationship, when I put on my practitioner hat or my plant dad hat, right, I take off my historian hat a little bit, or literary historian hat, it's about beauty. It's about what I just am drawn to, right? And then I know that I need to have it. I need to have it in my home. I need to have it in my yard. And I think also it's about like rediscovering the kind of sacred and perhaps therapeutic aspect of being in nature or working with plants as well. So sometimes, when I'm working out in my yard, and I noticed something the other day I was in there pulling up weeds from the garden beds because it's time for the new plants to come up, and I noticed that. So I had my Afro beats on and I was jamming, and at some point I thought, this is not an Afro beats moment. Like this is a moment where I really do, and I love my Afro beats. And sometimes being in the yard is that moment. But there are other times when it is about being with myself. Right? It's about prayer. It's about faith. It's about sowing my dreams and desires and wishes, right, into the soil, right? So that for the plant itself, but also about sort of communing with my God, right? And I noticed that at one point I had my gloves on, and I thought, today is a day I need to take these gloves off, and I need to touch the soil, right? And I need to really feel more deeply connected. So I think it's something about following your intuition, right? As well, that I would insist on, or insofar as I can provide a recommendation or make a suggestion. But it's following that intuition. I meet a lot of people who come to gardening because they want to grow food, right? And I aspire to that. I haven't gotten there yet, right? For me, it is completely, at one point, at one point I would say that it was impractical, but I wouldn't say that anymore after our discussion about beauty today. But I'm simply seeking the beautiful, right? And there is something healing in pursuing the beautiful that I'm after. So that would be my
I love
my 2
that.
cents.
I love that. Noticing, paying attention, and seeking the beautiful. And thank you for mentioning therapeutic. The work that I do with folks with expressive therapies uses story and uses time in nature to help us to reconnect to what's true, because when we're traumatized, one of the first things that we lose is discernment over what is harmful and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you spend more time out in the thing that you want to connect with, you will inevitably begin to learn all the things that you need to know what's harmful, what's food, what's medicine, and so on and so forth. You have one more thing you want to say?
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think there's something really valuable about embracing a spirit or a praxis of experimentation, right? And I think getting rid of this idea that you have to do it right, or that there is a single way to do it. That plant might die, or it may not grow as well as you think it will. Or, sometimes I put something in the ground, or I procrastinate about putting something in the ground because I'm like, oh, but what if I decide that it's going to look better over in this part of the yard later, and I have to dig it up and so forth and so on. So, but there is something about yielding to experimentation and not having to get it right the first time, and learning from the if we want to call them mistakes, we can call them learning opportunities, of working outside as well, of working with the land, of working with the earth as well. And so, I think being, and I'm sort of channeling or bringing that from, Carver, who had an experiment station, right, at Tuskegee, where he's experimenting with sweet potatoes and cotton and various foods and as well as other crops. And so I think, if we inhabit that spirit of experimentation, we don't have to get it right every time, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Last words, Dr. Rivers, especially about that telling people when they come to your space, like, experiment. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm actually sitting here ruminating on this idea of beauty right now, and what you were saying about purely seeking the beautiful and the distinction between beauty and food. And it strikes me that the distinction actually maybe not there at all.
I think that's right.
Right? Because if what you're drawn to is cultivating that which nourishes the pollinators who pollinate the food, then, like, if we're actually looking at the logic of the natural world,
that's right.
It's harder and harder to separate, utility from beauty.
Please give me more reasons to buy more beautiful plants, right? I welcome this, right?
Yeah.
My bank account may not, but I welcome it.
And then comes the beauty in the food crops.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They're not just
absolutely.
utility. They're gorgeous.
It's an ecosystem.
It absolutely
It's
is.
an ecosystem.
And I think
That's
there's
right.
something so rich about following the little piece of that pulls on each one of us,
That's
right?
right.
Because then
That's right.
collectively, we've got the flower tenders, and we've got the people who find vegetables to be the source of the greatest beauty, and
That's
then
right.
we've got the arborists and I could go on.
I love that.
But that didn't answer your question.
Oh, it did in a way. I mean, I love everything that you said, and I want to, I want to do Q&A, but I do want to first pause for the beauty of the work that you all are doing. That's a daily sort of labor. Much like pollinators, and you're in this natural rhythm of things. I want to thank you for your beauty, Dr. McInnes, Dr. Rivers. So I want you all to, and you all, so I want to just pause to do that. Oh,
For your beauty, Zelda. Yes.
Et moi.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do y'all want to know? Oh, we have a microphone that can come from back here.
1, 2, 1, 2. We have a microphone back here, so make sure everyone can hear your question. Here you are, Darryl.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for the panelists and your guidance, Zelda. Dr. McInnes, thank you specifically for carrying us through Booker T, and more importantly, Marcus Garvey, who, of course, was exonerated by the previous president, which sets up a whole nother trajectory for us in embracing him and what he offered us globally, which brings me back to the cipher that Zelda started around plot. Plot as that little piece of land that both of you referred to, Dr. Rivers, but plot as plotting to escape, and plot as story. In the subtitle of your forthcoming book, you have in plotting agrarian futures. And I want you to, if you can, in the short time that we have, speak to what that plot is.
Thank you for that really wonderful and generative question. I'll try to answer it quickly. So I'm theorizing, and I'm using that term in much the same way that Dr. Rivers explicated it so beautifully, building on the work of Sylvia Winter, who's talking about that distinction between the plot and the plantation, right? And I discovered that at Tuskegee, two of the most important aspects of Tuskegee's sort of liberatory vision of liberatory agriculture was, one was about that logic of experimentation, right? Through the agricultural experiment station that was called colloquially the agricultural experiment plot, right? And then there is also the agricultural extension program, right? So this idea of disseminating agricultural knowledge to poor rural black farmers in the country districts of Alabama, and then of course disseminating that information diasporically as well. And so I'm interested in the ways that here's a diagram by George Washington Carver about how to lay out a 40-acre farm. And you can see at the bottom of the diagram, he tells you where to plant pumpkins and peas and cotton. And then in the explication to that diagram, he tells you what to do each year, right? In year one, plant this here, and then year two, in order to ensure that the land is healthy, you need to rotate the crops, right? And so where the cotton was once planted, this other plant needs to be planted. And so I'm trying to demonstrate the ways that, at Tuskegee, they're trying to take that logic of plotting, right? And all of the resonances of that meaning, and they are trying to scale it up. And I talk about, the problem of scale, right? What happens when you scale it up too much, right? And it gets us back to the plantation, right? And that's a site of capitalist over-extraction, right, and exploitation, right? And so how that tension is a part of the agrarian futures, the ways that that's at the heart of the ways that Black people around the world envisioned the significance of agriculture as a mode of liberation, right, in slavery's aftermath. Yeah. I'll just add very quickly as a historical note, one of the things that I discovered and is really that I think about a lot as it relates to Tuskegee's extension program. They had the annual Tuskegee Farmers Conference, which began in 1892 and is still going to this day, and they would bring farmers in to campus to teach them about how to be better cultivators and farmers. And one of the things that they did, if we're talking about seeds and beauty, is that they gave seeds to farmers who could not afford it so that they could grow food to nourish themselves and nourish their families. And they also gave the women in the community flower seeds, right, so they could beautify their homes. And so if you'll go to slide number 13, you'll see they started an annual chrysanthemum show at Tuskegee around 1910, encouraging the people in the community to grow chrysanthemums to beautify their homes. So that connection between nourishment and beauty is right there in this particular archive. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, thank y'all so much for being here tonight. Connecting last night's screening of Family Trees and recognizing the 2 stories of family that were told there, and the narratives that you all have been discussing today, I find that family stories can arguably be the most difficult to tell. As storytellers, what best practices could we implement where we have the most influence, I do think, to share those stories within our families and within our communities?
Can I answer that one?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So one of the things that that folks can do to help draw the stories forward is to you can actually ask family members to be in community with you as storytellers. For instance, when we think of plot, and this is story plot, the way that I work with plot is that there's a wounding event. We have lots of them in our individual lives. Almost all of us can point to wounding events that have to do with colonialism. So there's a wounding event, and then that wounding event caused the loss. And so get people to identify what was the loss. If there was a loss, there's a want. I mean, clearly, right? And then what want have you been walking around with in your life trying to fulfill? What have you been trying to fix or fulfill because you lost something because of this wounding? And a lot of times when you put people together, especially family members, rather than them being in storytelling difficult space together of, no, that's not what happened, or don't tell what Uncle so-and-so did, and da-da-da-da-da. If you bring them together sometimes collectively and say, just, you don't have to share it with anybody, write down how you feel like you're wounded in our family, but then also wounded by what's been transmuted into our family because of colonialism. Just, write that down. Write down what you lost, write down what you want. And when people start sharing together what they want, rather than arguing over what had happened, then they begin to see collectively, and this is in any group of people, they begin to see collectively what it is that they can do to self-fulfill that want in healthy ways. And I find it with working with families therapeutically, I find that as a very powerful way, rather than focusing on the things, as you said, that could be really difficult with families. But that same method works really well individually,
Horticulture is an indigenous-led group of creatives who seek to return indigenous culture to our community through music and movement. The group's name honors the village of Horticulture, located east of West Point on the Eno and west of present-day Falls of the Neuse. In 1698, this village was a bustling epicenter of trade, primarily occupied by Saponi and Eno, and residents also included other indigenous peoples of differing languages, cultures, and societies. So today, this modern-day family of creatives perform ceremonies honoring our water, land, sun, fire, animals, and original language and culture. So we're joined by Horticulture, who will share some song and then lead us out into the lobby where we can enjoy refreshments. There are books to be for sale. Terry Spate can sign her book. There is a table full of her books. And of course the seed swap, which many of you have contributed to. So lots of seeds to take home with you today, and we'll continue connecting and reflecting on the day. Thank you.
Hi again. New hat. I am going to sing to you all a song that, as I listened and participated today and consumed and created and breathed, this song kept singing through me. And I will tell you, it's a song that a friend of mine who's long passed on, she's an ancestor now, that she wrote, and I heard it once when she sang it to me, let's see if we count backwards, 40 plus years ago. And for me, it really embodied everything that we've talked about the land, about how it is that we love ourselves and we love the land, and and nature and our indigenous selves, but then also how we can allow our wounds to not become magnified by our thoughts of what happens when we internalize some of the things that have happened. So here we go. Enough of that. I will do a little beat with it. That was the first beat. I have considered the lilies growing in the fields, their garments so perfect, their beautiful reveal. They are fed by the force that determines all life. Consider we're all lilies free from our own strife. I have fallen in the footsteps of others gone before, and suffered as a soldier in an unending war. While the right hand held a peace branch, the left hand held a gun. My heart became a battleground, each piercing bullet stung. I knelt down on my knees, from the battle I was weak. As the angels were with me, I heard their voices speak. The past has only made you who you are. You can measure what it's worth, but don't take pleasure in the scar. I hid my face in terror and prayed the deed be done. But with faith as my weapon, the raging war was won. As anger surrendered, I heard love's trumpet sound. As fear, pain, and ugliness were buried in the ground. I have considered the lilies growing in the fields, their garments so perfect, their beautiful reveal. We are fed by the force that determines all life. Consider we're all lilies free from our own strife. Ooh. Home, I heard it long ago, so clear, so beautiful. I made my way back on my own to a place before I was afraid, before I took a name that wasn't mine to take.
Sally Ray Harris. Sally Ray Harris was my grandmother. Sally Ray Harris was an indigenous person. She was Marconi, and Tuscarora. Sally made her home along the banks of the Eno River. But Sally could not remain home, so she walked. Sally walked. She walked the Eno River to the Little River, to the Flat River, to the Dan River, to the Roanoke River, to the Staunton River. Sally walked to Virginia. And then Sally would walk back from the Staunton River, the Roanoke River, the Dan River, to the Black River, to the Little River, to the Eno River. Sally had a family. Her husband Frank and 13 children walked with Sally. Why? Why? Why did Sally walk? Sally walked because there was a discriminatory tax applied to free people of color. Had Sally stayed in one place all the time, she would have had to pay a tax for herself, her husband Frank, and all 13 children. So Sally walked. Sally walked, but she really wanted to stay home.
This next song I wrote about 2 weeks ago. It has one word, and so you all can really help me. It has one word. You don't have to remember a lot. But I will tell you a little bit about the song before we kind of practice how y'all gonna do your part. So every, like now and then, on some land that I lived on for 20-something years between Durham and Orange County, that I moved from, that I miss, like home. I would, burn my fires and do my firework and sometimes put the char into the garden. And people would ask me questions like, why are you doing that? And so there's like nitrogen, there's so many beautiful things that happen. And sometimes it was intuitive, when to burn, what to put in there, how much to put in, how much not to put in. And we were going to be singing at a prescribed burn, and we are going to be singing at a prescribed burn. It's currently, you all know that there's a lot of fires going on in this state, so there's a lot of the burns that are happening that nature needs to do, so we don't need to be doing none ourselves. But from that, there's like beautiful things that happen that can only happen because of fire. So the pines, some of the serotinous pines can shoot their cones, and then those cones can grow up to beautiful new pine trees. And we have things like mint and wildflowers and all kinds of things that grow because there was fire. So with this song, I'll first give you the visual of what happened in my head when I was singing it in the shower. As I just saw those little ashes. You ever burn a fire and you watch the little ashes go up and they just keep going up? And at nighttime when I would burn, there was this beautiful fantasy for me of how they would go up and then they disappear because the sky is kind of dark, but then the stars are there. So, so that's the visual for the song, and you'll feel that once you get into it. And now let's talk about your part, which Adjusher is going to help with your part. So, y'all ready? Yeah. Okay, so your part is fire, 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 hey, fire. Okay, you got that? Now, that is boom. So now the fun part will be, so you're the fire. You know how some of the fire, it's got a lot of work to do, like those big giant logs that turn into these giant, beautiful, flaming char. You know, you're gonna stay and do that part. Your thing is, you can't lift off the ground and go with me when I go, right? You gotta stay because you're holding the fire steady. Fire. And then I'm gonna take off and I'm gonna, just so you hear it and don't get like, what the heck just happened? I'm gonna be fire, 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 fire. Okay? All right, but you just keep doing your thing, right? Okay. All right, so let's start with fire, louder, fire, fire, fire. Let's put some water on fire.
Welcome to all who come here. I am called Beverly A. Scarlett.
Alamance, Durham, Negros, Orange, Amai, Ajusher, Eno, Okanichi, Shikori, Sisabaha, Waitiwa.
Alamance, Durham and Orange County is the home of Ajusher, Eno, Okanichi, Shikori, and Sisabaha.
Ina, Ming, Yama, Ajusher.
I am mother of the band Ajusher.
We, Ohake, Zelda Lockhart, Yamahe.
My daughter of the band, Zelda Lockhart, is on vocals.
We Teka, Lucas Brown, Yama, guitar A.
My son of the band, Lucas Brown, is on guitar.
Taka, Santos Flores, Yama, Congos A.
My son of the band, Santos Flores, is on congas.
Taka, Xavier Adams, Yama, Gear A.
My son of the band, Xavier Adams, is on gyro.
Biwa.
Thank you.
I had greeted you in our original language of the Yesa people of this land. Those are the people that I descend from, the Saponi, the Tuscarora, and of course, I'm African American. So we're going to do a song in Yesa, and you all are going to help me sing. Yesa, 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 Maniwa, 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 Wagi, 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 Mai, Amai, 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 Yesa, 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 Yesa. We're gonna keep singing right out to the lobby, to the sea shed.